My journey into software engineering has been a winding road filled with both challenges and incredible opportunities. I've had the privilege of working at some of the world's most influential tech companies, Google, Microsoft, and Apple, experiencing firsthand what it's like to be on both sides of the interview table, as a candidate striving to stand out and as an interviewer searching for the right fit. I know the nerves, the late-night prep sessions, and the pressure to perform. I also know what interviewers are really looking for. Beyond just technical skills, they want to see your thought process, your ability to communicate, and your potential to grow. This guide is built from those real-world experiences, distilled into practical advice that focuses on what truly matters in the hiring process. It's not just about passing an interview, but about understanding what makes you a valuable team member. With 4 years of experience, you're expected to do more than just write code. You should be able to own features end-to-end, understand the bigger picture of system architecture, and actively contribute to design discussions that shape the product. Your real-world experience, those projects you've shipped, the bugs you've squashed, the features you've improved, is your biggest asset. Let's make sure you know how to showcase it in a way that resonates with interviewers. We'll work together to bridge the gap between your daily work and the unique demands of technical interviews, translating your hands-on experience into stories and solutions that stand out. My goal is to demystify the entire process for you, breaking it down into clear, actionable steps you can follow. You'll learn how to prepare efficiently, focus on what matters, and walk into interviews with confidence. This isn't about memorizing a list of tricks or rote solutions. Instead, it's about building a strong, adaptable problem-solving framework that you can apply to any challenge, in any interview, and even in your day-to-day work. Think of this guide as an ongoing conversation with a mentor who's been through the same journey, faced the same doubts, and found ways to succeed. Your journey to your next back-end role starts right here. Together, we'll make sure you're ready to take that next big step in your career and truly thrive. This guide is your toolkit for back-end interview prep. We'll break down real-world questions by category, core language, frameworks, system design, so you know what to expect. You'll learn how to structure answers, think out loud, and engage interviewers. We'll cover frameworks for tackling problems, from Java concurrency to API design. Confidence is key. We'll build it by demystifying the process and giving you a clear plan. You'll learn to anticipate questions, avoid common mistakes, and tell compelling stories about your work. By the end, you'll have a roadmap and the confidence to land the back-end role you deserve. At 4 years in, you're expected to go beyond basics. Master your main language, Java or Kotlin, especially memory model, concurrency, collections, and for Kotlin, coroutines and null safety. No Spring Boot inside out. Dependency injection, Bean lifecycle, Spring security, Spring data, and actuators. Be able to explain, not just use, these tools. API design is critical. RESTful endpoints, HTTP methods, status codes, versioning, and authentication like OAuth 2 or JWT. Know when to use GraphQL or gRPC. Understand databases, SQL, PostgreSQL, MySQL, NoSQL, MongoDB, Redis, data modeling, indexing, transactions. Be fluent with Git and basic cloud services, AWS, GCP, Azure. CI/CD knowledge, automating build, test, and deploy is expected. Show you can own features from code to production. Explaining how tools work together is what sets you apart. Picture a user clicking Add to Cart. The request hits a load balancer, then a Spring Boot microservice in a Docker container managed by Kubernetes. The controller passes the request, the service layer handles business logic, and data is stored in PostgreSQL via Spring Data JPA. Redis caches frequent data for speed. CI/CD automates code deployment. Push to Git, Jenkins builds, tests, and deploys to Kubernetes. Each step shows your understanding of modern backend architecture. This is the holistic view interviewers want. Be ready to walk through this flow in detail. Expect most technical interviews to kick off with questions about Java and Spring Boot fundamentals. These are the building blocks of backend development, and interviewers want to see that you have a solid grasp of the basics before moving on to more advanced topics. It's not just about memorizing facts, it's about demonstrating a deep understanding of how and why things work the way they do. For Java, be prepared to clearly explain the difference between the equal sign operator, which checks for reference equality, and the equals method, which checks for logical equality. This distinction is especially important in classes like string, where equals is overridden to compare the actual contents of the objects. Interviewers may ask you to write code or spot bugs related to these concepts, so make sure you can confidently discuss when to use each one and why it matters in real-world applications. You should also be ready to discuss thread safety in Java. Understand the differences between using synchronized methods, which lock entire methods or code blocks, and using classes like atomic integer, which provide lock-free thread-safe operations. Be able to talk about the trade-offs. Synchronized methods can be simpler but may impact performance, while atomic classes are more efficient but sometimes harder to use correctly. Real-world scenarios often require you to choose the right approach for the problem at hand. For Spring Boot, make sure you can explain the entire bean lifecycle. This includes the instantiation of beans, dependency injection, initialization, and eventual destruction. Interviewers may ask you to walk through what happens behind the scenes when a Spring Boot application starts up, so be ready to describe each stage and why it's important for application stability and flexibility. Know how the @AutoWired annotation works in detail. Spring scans for these annotations during component scanning, uses reflection to identify dependencies, and injects them from the application context. Be prepared to discuss how this process enables loose coupling and easier testing, and what happens if a dependency isn't found or if multiple beans match the type. Be able to discuss the differences between field, constructor, and setter injection in Spring Boot. Explain the pros and cons of each and why constructor injection is often preferred. It makes dependencies explicit, supports immutability, and is easier to test. Interviewers may ask you to refactor code or explain which method you'd choose in a given scenario. Show that you understand not just how to use Spring, but how it works under the hood. This means being able to talk about concepts like dependency injection, inversion of control, and the role of the application context. Demonstrating this level of understanding shows you can troubleshoot and optimize applications, not just follow tutorials. Interviewers are looking for depth, not just surface-level knowledge. Practice explaining complex concepts in a clear, concise way. Use real-world examples from your experience to illustrate your points, and don't be afraid to admit if you don't know something. Just show a willingness to learn. Be ready for follow-up questions that dig deeper into your answers. Interviewers may challenge your assumptions or ask you to solve problems on the spot. Stay calm, think aloud, and walk them through your reasoning process. Demonstrate that you're comfortable with both classic and modern approaches to concurrency and dependency management. Show that you can work with legacy code as well as adopt new best practices, adapting your approach as technology evolves. Most importantly, show that you can connect concepts across Java and Spring Boot. Don't just recite definitions. Explain how these ideas work together to solve real business problems, and how you've applied them in your own projects. That's what makes you stand out as a candidate, demonstrating not just technical skill, but the ability to think critically, communicate clearly, and solve problems effectively. As you move further into the interview process, you'll notice the questions become more complex and open-ended. Interviewers are now looking to assess your ability to think at a higher level, beyond just coding. They want to see how you approach designing systems, structuring APIs, and solving real-world problems. For API design questions, be prepared to outline endpoints for a blogging platform. Think about users, posts, and comments. Specify the appropriate HTTP methods for each action, and don't forget to mention pagination for scalability. Consider how you'd handle authentication, error handling, and versioning as well. Explaining your choices clearly shows you understand both the technical and practical aspects of API design. When it comes to database questions, if you're told queries are running slowly, start by checking for missing indexes. Dive into the execution plans to identify bottlenecks, and discuss how you'd optimize queries for better performance. You might also want to touch on normalization, denormalization, and how to handle large data sets efficiently. For system design scenarios, like building a service similar to TinyURL, begin by clarifying requirements. Propose a hash-based key-value store for mapping URLs and discuss how you'd scale the system to handle millions of users. Mention caching strategies, such as using Redis, and consider how you'd ensure reliability and fault tolerance. Always start by gathering requirements, then move to a high-level design, and finally discuss how you'd scale and optimize the system. This structured approach helps interviewers follow your thought process. Don't hesitate to ask clarifying questions if something isn't clear. Structuring your answers logically and methodically is key to demonstrating your problem-solving skills. Remember, interviewers are interested in your reasoning and approach, not just the final answer. Walk them through your thought process step by step. Practice breaking down complex problems into smaller, manageable parts and explain your reasoning as you go. This shows you can tackle ambiguity and adapt to new challenges. Use real-world examples from your experience to illustrate your points. Relating your answers to practical scenarios makes your solutions more convincing and memorable. By following this approach, you'll demonstrate not only technical expertise but also maturity, communication skills, and readiness for mid-level engineering roles. Behavioral questions often decide who gets the job. Use the STAR method: situation, task, action, result. Keep the situation and task brief. Focus on your specific role. Detail your actions, what you did, how you solved problems, and your thought process. Use I statements to highlight your contribution. Quantify results when possible. Reduced latency, resolved conflict, prevented bugs. Prepare stories for common themes: conflict, failure, success, leadership. Practice out loud to sound polished and confident. STAR makes your answers clear, concise, and impactful. Preparation strategy is as important as technical skill. Start early. Spaced repetition beats cramming. Make a schedule. Dedicate days to Java, Spring, and system design. Practice out loud. Explain your thinking. Record yourself. Do mock interviews. Don't jump into code. Clarify requirements, outline your approach, and communicate your plan. Be honest about what you don't know. Show how you'd approach unfamiliar problems. Interviewers value problem solving over memorization. Avoid bluffing. Honesty builds trust. Use feedback to improve your communication. Structure your answers for clarity. Focus on demonstrating your process, not just the solution. Consistency and self-awareness set you apart. This playbook will help you avoid common pitfalls and stand out. Your growth doesn't stop here. Keep learning. Read Effective Java and Designing Data-Intensive Applications for deep dives. Use Baildung for Java Spring, LeetCode for coding, and System Design Primer for architecture. Try educative.io for interactive interview prep. Watch Gaurav Sen and Hussein Nasser on YouTube for system design and backend deep dives. Mix reading, coding, and video to reinforce concepts. Use these resources to stay sharp and grow as an engineer. Keep building. Your career is a marathon, not a sprint.